So I know I look crazy, but I'm not crazy. I love my children. I love my boys so much. I wouldn't hurt them.
When you think about what a mother is meant to represent, it's meant to represent a safe place, a safe space, isn't it? Like for my children, and I have nearly four, could actually go into labour whilst I'm talking to you today because genuinely I am at my due date. But essentially, my job as a mother is to provide that constant source of love, the protection, the nurturing. And the thing about Tiffany Lucas is that she appeared to do just that. So she genuinely seemed to embody the ideal mother online. She was always sharing heartfelt posts about her two gorgeous little boys, 9-year-old Jaden and 6-year-old Maurice, affectionately known as Peanut. And to honestly describe her, you would say she seemed like a devoted parent on the surface. But the thing is, we know that social media posts are often hiding a darker reality. And in this case, it's one that's going to culminate in an unimaginable tragedy. Because Tiffany Lucas didn't end up protecting her children. She betrayed them in the most devastating and unimaginable way. This case is one of those that leaves you reeling, of course, because we're talking about two innocent boys whose lives are cut short by the very person they should have been able to trust the most in the world. But I also think it will cause a level of conflict in deciding the culpability level of this woman. And that's something that we can discuss as I take you through the facts. If you're new to my channel, by the way, I release my content twice weekly here ad infinitum. I always will. So if you like crime deep dives, why don't you get your notifications on and subscribe so that you never miss an episode? Also, if you want more, you can get it on my YouTube membership and Patreon. Big shout out to all of you who support me there. Can't do this without you. Let's crack on with today's true crime case. So on Wednesday, the 8th of November 2023 is where it begins. At 11:07 a.m., the Bullitt County Sheriff's Department in Shepherdsville, Kentucky, they receive a call, and that call comes from a couple who live on Bentwood Drive. And I think it's really important to note the fact that this couple actually went out of their way to make sure that help was sent to this address, because so often we hear people just wanting to stay out of these things, and we know that that can be costly on many levels. Now, they had actually heard shots fired from the house of one of their neighbours, and the shots came from Tiffany Lucas's home. In fact, they're telling a very disturbing story that their neighbour, 32-year-old Tiffany Lucas, has come running out of her house onto their driveway and basically are telling them that her kids are dying. Now, when the police officers arrive on the scene really quickly, the worst fears are confirmed, because obviously when somebody's telling that story, you're hoping to yourself they've got it wrong. You're hoping that they're just dramatising or that they're worried about something that isn't playing out in reality. But actually, that's not what's going to happen. They find two young boys literally with gunshot wounds to the head. Now, that's very specific, isn't it? Gunshot wounds to the head. I mean, let's be clear, you can't accidentally shoot two people through the head. You just can't do that. I mean, we appreciate that in America, there are lots of scenarios where people are accidentally killed by guns. That does happen without a shadow of a doubt. But you're not going to get two clean shots at the head of two separate children, are you? That's got to be purposeful. It's got to be with intent. Now, the children are 9-year-old Jaden Howard and 6-year-old Maurice Peanut Baker Jr. So Maurice is called Peanut by those who love and refer to him. So obviously I'm going to describe him in that manner. A neighbour had actually initially discovered the boys. She'd gone into the house because obviously the mother in this case had actually alerted them, said that there were children dying. So this good neighbour was obviously wanting to go and try and help. I can't even imagine the trauma they're going to be left with, because can you imagine you're going into somebody's home, you're thinking to yourself, this is like the worst nightmare scenario that you've ever entertained in your life. And then it's confirmed. And there's nothing you can do. You can't save children. You've got no medical experience. You just know that they're gravely injured and you're powerless in that moment. To actually walk in and find these boys wounded and covered in blood in a bedroom, which is what happened, must be absolutely breathtakingly blindsiding for you for the rest of your life. Now, it's also noticed when the police arrived that there's a gun on the bed. The neighbour had desperately and valiantly tried to help Jaden and Peanut. They'd genuinely gone out of their way to make sure that there was everything that could be done to protect those boys. Now, they were alive, but they were in a really critical condition. At this point, they've rushed to Norton's Children's Hospital with a police escort. This is where doctors attempt to save them, but unfortunately, they both die from their serious injuries. And when you just think about a child being shot in the head, I mean, I think it would be almost impossible for them to survive. I mean, they're not the size of adults, are they? So, whilst we do see some miraculous examples where people are shot in the head and do indeed survive, it's rare. And I would imagine it's very rare where children are concerned. Now, Chief Deputy Alex Payne, they later actually said that the boys were shot in an area that would not be survivable for anybody. So that again brings you back into that position where this was obviously a shot to kill on both levels. Now, at the scene, Tiffany Lucas, this is the mother of Jaden and Maurice, or Peanut, she had been laid down, apparently, collapsed on the neighbour's driveway when the police arrived. So she's obviously in a real state. She's then arrested and charged with 2 counts of murder because obviously she was the person present, she was the person with the gun, and there were 2 dead children. Now, when she arrives in custody, Lucas actually has a conversation with an officer and says that she shot herself in the ear. Now, the police said that when they checked that area, there was no wound at all. You have to ask yourself, is it possible at that point that she had also tried to shoot herself as well as the children? Because we know that there are problems with guns, and it would also play out very regularly in these rare circumstances that it becomes a murder-suicide as opposed to just plain murder. Now, Detective Richard Beale, he asked her, did you mean to hurt your children? And she replied in that moment, it was an accident. And then she starts talking about the fact that she's been manipulated through Facebook, through the internet, or through Wi-Fi. Now, automatically, as somebody who works in my field, but also lost their father to psychosis, this is something that does play out in lots of circumstances. I've also worked with a lot of people with schizoid affective disorder, schizophrenia, and one of the commonalities and threads that I can draw down from that is that they believe that they are being manipulated through various different outlets, from things that they're seeing on the television to social media, etc. This is not uncommon, and it is in context with psychosis and psychotic breaks. I'm not saying that's actually what happened. I'm just introducing the comment that this is actually contextual with people who suffer from these issues. Now, she also told the officers that she'd left the gun in the bedroom and that no one else had been in the house that day. So she's implicating herself in that moment. She also said, I'm in such a bad spot and I'm so stupid. Again, that isn't really in line with what we're talking about. To actually say I'm in such a bad spot, that's an internalization, a feeling of being emotionally overwhelmed, an expression of that. But to add to that, and I'm so stupid, stupid is not contextual when it comes down to murdering 2 children. Stupid is leaving the oven on when you go out and burning the food that you thought you were going to heat up later. These are things that are accidental. These are things that are silly. Stupid is a word that you would not associate with killing and murder. That is a far graver description that would be required. So, like I said, that in itself, description wise, just doesn't seem to stand in tune with what we're talking about. Now, when she's interrogated, apparently she was really dazed. She became very agitated. She was very snappy with the officers on a few occasions, which you wouldn't expect if you've just been caught killing 2 children, because at the end of the day, you bang to rights, you've been actually caught doing this. There's not a lot you can do about that. You've got to accept your culpability and guilt. The fact that she's being snappy and defensive means that she isn't really recognizing the seriousness of the interrogation, which is to obviously explore the guilt that she's carrying for the crime that she's committed. And it shows a level of confidence that we wouldn't expect in these situations. But again, the way that she's coming across is odd. She's rambling. She's saying that she'd never do anything to harm her children, that she's a really good mum. She's saying, I've been manipulated. That's why I've acted in this way. She actually said, I know I look crazy, but I'm not crazy. I love my children. I love my children. I love my boys so much. I wouldn't have hurt them, but I just felt like I was letting them play the video games and I wasn't like focusing how I was supposed to, you know? Video games and YouTube and the kids, it just messes with their minds so people can manipulate their parents or do whatever they want. I feel like someone put something up on my house or on me, I just don't feel right. I'm like, no, I don't do this. Like, I love my kids. So this is kind of a ramble, but there's also a particular narrative coming out, which is that she feels like she's not doing enough, but equally she feels like what she's exposing to them to is potentially damaging them and her, and that there is this level of manipulation that she's exploring and enduring. But at that point, she just breaks down and starts sobbing. Now, it was later found by the investigators that Lucas had fired 4 bullets in 30 seconds to kill both of her children. It's a juxtaposition, really, isn't it, to describe yourself as a good mum when you've actually murdered the 2 children that you were there to protect. You know, at the end of the day, you might have been seen as a good mum for 9 years, but the second you murder your kids, you've kind of lost that position. It automatically makes you a terrible mum. No matter what your motivations and belief systems, you know, you've done the worst thing in the world. Now, I'm not for 1 minute saying that she's in a good place at this moment in time. She clearly isn't. But you can't convince investigators that you're a good mother when you've shot your children in cold blood, literally through the heads. It's a heartbreaking situation beyond belief. No one can excuse her actions, but she's obviously seeking to try to validate her actions to some degree, and it's not going to work. Now, in some of the body cam footage, she's saying, "You're sick," to an officer. This is after he's told her that he can't see that she's been shot in the ear. And you're looking and thinking to yourself, this just doesn't make sense. You're somebody who's being arrested for the murder of your children, and you're actually calling an officer sick because they can't see an injury on you. Now, that to me, again, provokes a reaction that makes me think that she's certainly not dealing with reality in the way that you or I would be in such a situation. It's like she's not quite within her mind. Now, Chief Deputy Alex Payne commented on this and said, "You can have an individual who's suffering from some type of mental illness, you can have an individual who has some kind of substance abuse problem, or an individual that can simply be evil. Or it can be a combination of those things. I haven't seen any other outliers other than those 3. And so right now, I guess it's anybody's guess as to which one of those she covers. Pick your poison, none of it's good. The result is horrific." I think it's fair to say that their judgment is correct. You know, they're looking at 3 major possibilities: 1, malevolence and evil; 2, dependency; and 3, somebody who's having a psychotic break, mental illness, etc. Which again is incredibly rare. The vast majority of people with mental illness are more likely to harm themselves than anybody else, but there are outliers in that who do harm others. And I suppose it could also be, as they noted, a combination of all those. I guess you do have to pick your poison in these cases. Now, on November the 12th, the community actually held a vigil for the boys, because this is unbelievable, isn't it? Playing out in your community, in your neighbourhood, 2 gorgeous little boys, their lives ended by the woman who was meant to protect them. There was a massive turnout for them. Lots of the children who went to school with the boys attended. And you ask yourself that question: how on earth did it get to this point? How on earth did it get to a point where we are laying to rest 2 gorgeous, loved boys? Because believe me, these boys were adored by their wider family. How do we arrive at this position? And I guess we have to explore a little bit about Tiffany Lucas, the mother. Now, I'm going to be honest, there isn't a lot of information out there. It's one of those scenarios where I wish I could find more, but I can't find that much else. So when it comes down to it, there isn't a lot of information that gives us insight into her early relationships, for example, or her early life. What I have found out is that on her Facebook profile, the relationship status was listed as divorced. We know that on March the 13th, 2014, she had a child with Darrell Howard. They named that child Jaden Tyrell Howard. And it seems that Lucas and Darrell separated at some point after Jaden's birth, but they do seem to have stayed on good terms. Then in 2016, she had another son with a man called Maurice Baker, and they named the child Morris Baker Jr., but friends and family would affectionately call him Peanuts. And it's unclear at what point this relationship turned sour, but apparently there was quite a serious custody battle. It took an emotional toll on everyone involved, and Lucas was raising Peanut as a single parent. However, the boys seem to have a large extended family. Jaden had an older brother on his dad's side called Darrell, and the boys had loving grandparents, aunts, uncles, cousins. They all were adored by them. Now, from Tiffany Lucas's Facebook post, it seems like she did have quite a close relationship with her own dad, but he'd passed away, which would obviously be very traumatic for her. Also, in 2016, Lucas did end up opening a convenience store. It was called Ms. Tiff's One Stop Shop. However, it obviously wasn't somewhere that a lot of people stopped because it shut down in 2017. Now, in 2018, She was charged with drug possession. She did actually plead guilty, and she was actually sent to prison for a month because of this. So that demonstrates that there's potentially some dependency issues. Certainly, we are in a scenario where if somebody has a predisposition for psychosis, for example, you don't want them having any mind-altering substances in their body, because the reality is you cannot quantify whether you're going to have another psychotic break, and what you act like in those breaks is very distinct from who you might be on a day-to-day level. And if you know this about yourself, you should be giving drugs a wide berth. Now, there was an event in July 2019 that I think must have been devastating, because Darrell, Jaden's father, dies. And she writes a really interesting post on Facebook. She says, "This can't be real. The world's best father and such a great man all around. Our son's hurt, lost, devastated, and brokenhearted. The pain I see and feel is unbearable. Life's not fair. Why him? Of everyone in the world, why you? I will never get over this one. You taught me how to love. You taught me so much. I can't stop crying. How do I do this without you? You were literally my best friend. We talked every day and seen each other every day. No, no, no. What a life to take and bond to break. With respect." That's out of a song by the now disgraced P. Diddy. But not saying there's any relationship there with evil. Just throwing it in there that is a line. What a life to take and a bond to break. I'll be missing you. Anyway, now Tiffany Lucas didn't seem to feel the same, what can I say, fondness towards the father of a second child. In fact, one of the last Facebook posts that I found was a sharing post. So obviously it was out there for everyone to see. And it said, "Sorry, but a BD," I'm presuming that's baby daddy, "can be bitter too. Not helping financially because you and the mum aren't on good terms, not helping physically or helping with pickup from practices and daycare, not wanting to create a set schedule for your kids, constantly trying to make things harder for the mum, halfway doing stuff, picking and choosing, etc. All that is bitter. But you all ain't ready for that conversation yet." Well, just going to throw it out there, Tiffany. Probably not the best thing to do to put it online for all and sundry to see if you don't really feel that the baby daddy is ready for a conversation like that yet, because it's just going to make the challenges even more challenging. And don't get me wrong, I get it. There are deadbeat dads out there. And when you are a single mum and it's costing you a lot of money to raise your kids, it can be deeply frustrating. But keep the information in, not out, when it comes down to social media. Now, in 2023, she ended up living in a rental home. This is in Shepherdsville, Kentucky. This is with her two boys. The family who actually cleaned out that house after the murders, I can't even begin to imagine what that would be like. They said it was literally filthy. You had no utilities. There was even an eviction notice on the counter. So I guess we can draw down from that the picture of this woman right now is somebody who's struggling. She's struggling financially, she's struggling relationally, she's struggling potentially with drugs. It may have been that her shop closed down because of her financial struggles. It could just be that there wasn't people interested enough to actually go in and buy things, which caused that closure. And I've looked online as much as I can to try to glimpse also into the personalities of the boys. Again, there isn't a great deal out there. One of the things that I found on a photo of Facebook that Tiffany Lucas wrote was that Jaden was small for his age, with the boys often being mistaken as twins despite their age difference. I'm going to imagine that also represents a closeness between the boys. Both of the boys were students at Freedom Elementary in Bullitt County, and a teacher had written on Jaden's obituary, "I had the pleasure of having him in my kindergarten class at Shelby. He was the most polite, caring student. Rest in heaven, sweet boy." And I have managed to find some interviews where I've listened to family members of both of the boys just talk about how wonderful they were and how welcome they were in their world and how they would have all have taken those children. So very clearly, absolutely doted on and lovely, kind, compassionate kids with a future they both deserved. Now, in September 2024, just to make it clear on how the proceedings went, initially, Lucas pled not guilty by reason of insanity. So at this point, they obviously scheduled the trial, and that was scheduled for December. But in late October 2024, she did plead guilty to 2 counts of murder. She also waived her right to a trial. So obviously, that goes straight to sentencing. Now, on a positive note, that means that the family don't have to go through the ordeal and trauma of sitting in a situation in court where they have to have every horrible fact drawn up about this crime, and also go through the emotional burden of carrying what they actually have to endure during that period with them for the rest of their lives. So it's good. It also means that the family have got that sense of closure regarding what she believes she is guilty of, which in this case is admitting to double murder. And I think that can also make it a slightly easier cross to burden, because of the fact that you know that this person has taken some accountability for what they've done. So in November 2024, Lucas's sentencing takes place. Now, Regina Rowan, who's Jaden's paternal grandmother, during this situation gave a really heartbreaking impact statement in court. She's obviously a victim in this case. She's lost her grandchild. She was really upset. In fact, she was really trying to compose herself when she spoke. She said, "You know, we love Jaden and Maurice. You know, Jaden was the only thing we'd left, and you took him from us." Because, of course, what she's referring to then is the fact that the father died. So Jaden was the embodiment of dad, the connector, the thread.
You know we love Jaden and Maurice. You know Jaden was the only thing we had left. And you took him from us. You know I had already lost his dad. And then my other son. And then you took Jaden. You have ripped our lives apart.
So she went on to say, you know, I'd already lost his dad, and then my other son. I mean, my God, can you imagine that kind of grief, guys? This woman hasn't just lost one son, she's lost two sons and a grandson. How do you even breathe? Genuinely. The grief must be all-consuming beyond belief. She went on to say, and then you took my Jaden. You've ripped our lives apart, and you know that you could have gave them kids to us and we would have took care of them, but you've been selfish. My heart's in pieces, and you know that you always had a place to drop them off. You took him from me, and I hurt every day. Every second of the day I'm hurting. And I hope they give you 2 life sentences without the possibility of parole. I want you to suffer just like I'm suffering right now. They did not deserve that. You took my little men from me, and we all loved them so much. You've hurt so many people, Tiffany. You can just hear, can't you, the trauma and the desperation and the just stunned shock that she had options and choices and didn't use those options and choices. Like Grandma is saying here, just drop them off. We'd have looked after them, would have loved them. Whatever space you needed, you would have given it you. This child who was genetically connected to the boy that they lost, that is something that again just opens the wound further. Now, Morris, Peanut's aunt, also gave a statement and said that she considered Jaden to be her nephew as well as Morris. She actually directly spoke to Lucas and said, "You broke my brother's heart, my mum's heart, and the heart of anyone who encountered them. Jaden and Morris didn't see you for who you really are. They loved you so much. But at the end of the day, you became what children at that age fear most, a monster. Not for 1 minute do I believe you were in a hard spot. You had the support in so many ways that you could have used. Like I often told you when we spoke, being a good mum is also making the decision that you can't give the boys the best life and allowing another parent to step in. But you refused to do so. Selfishly, because that wouldn't align with what social media saw. Instead, you decided to play God and decide the boys' fates. I often see court shows where the defendants are forgiven by the victim's family, but not today. Not by me. I will never forgive you. I was going to write, I hope every day you close your eyes that they haunt you, but I don't. You don't deserve to see them. And they don't deserve to see you. You should never get to see their faces." So you can just hear, can't you, the absolute rage that exists within the family. And that's a really interesting statement at the end, isn't it? That she doesn't even want her to be haunted by her children because she doesn't even deserve to see them ever again. Also, Naomi Crawford, who is Morris Sr.'s sister, they told the court that Lucas had taken away that opportunity to have a relationship with the nephew. And she actually talked about how Lucas was really manipulative and controlling and had used Morris Sr.'s son as leverage to basically have power over him. And then, of course, Morris Sr., who is Peanut's dad, said, "Lucas held my son over my head." He said, "So many birthdays he missed. I had a party planned. and she never let him come. I begged her. The last time I texted her, I asked her, please, can I just talk to my son? She ignored me. So basically, he's saying the bond that I struggled to have is as a result of your actions. And I couldn't be present in his life, not because I didn't wish to be. I was making efforts to do so. You prevented that happening. Like, we're talking about parental alienation here, aren't we? And he actually looked directly at Tiffany Lucas and said, you know what you are. Now, this is really interesting because this means there is a backdrop behaviourally that isn't involved, shall we say, where mental health conditions are concerned, that seem to suggest there is an ongoing pattern of behaviour that she has towards at least one of the parents in this situation, Morris Sr. And this person is obviously very angry about the fact that he feels that she's denied him a relationship. And that pattern of behaviour is distinct from, as I said, having a mental health breakdown. So there are certainly things about Tiffany Lucas' parenting that I think we can absolutely criticise, one of which being that she doesn't allow this father to be present and consistent in her son's life. Now, in the closing statements, Tiffany Lucas's defence described her, quote, as a devoted mother. Now, at that point, what am I going to say? It didn't go down well in court. I mean, you can just imagine in this moment, can't you? The defence lawyer coming out there and being like, yeah, she murdered both the boys, but she was really devoted to them. I don't know whether devotion and murder are usually in the same sentence. Yes, they are. They are. Devotion, killing children, almost interchangeable. Your defense is rubbish. I know, I haven't got anywhere to go with this. It's really hard. Clearly no one believes what I'm saying. But you can imagine, can't you? It's the feeling for those in court of irony and juxtaposition in that second. You're telling me that this woman was a devoted mother. We're here because she murdered her children. And the grieving family members, it's just a slap in the face when people use that kind of language. Now, our returners Vavnichak and Villavicencio, they argued that her mental health had deteriorated. She was apparently experiencing delusions and a psychotic break. Vavnichak said that Lucas was in withdrawal for addiction to opioids, and also that can provoke delusions and create psychotic breaks, that can be an effect of this. They also argued that she was trying to get clean, and that in trying to get clean, it had triggered a psychosis. Now, the problem with that is there are so many excuses with it, it's not going to be helpful when it comes down to those people listening. You've got family members there who've lost two beautiful boys, and the idea that this was her trying her best to be a good mum by getting clean, and that eventuates in her killing her children, well, that sounds a little bit convenient, doesn't it? It's as if they're trying to paint her in the best picture possible, but it's really, really at a complete opposite to her actions. So it's hard to swallow. It's a bitter pill in that moment to acknowledge what the defense lawyer is trying to say. They also tried to suggest that she was saying that God had been trying to directly speak to her, and that she believed that scripture was written in the bark of a tree. Now, she did have a mental health evaluation by Dr. Philip Resnick, who's a forensic psychiatrist. He said she was experiencing two co-occurring powerful delusions in the days leading up to the murder. Now, these were delusions of grandeur. So she's believing basically that God has chosen her for a higher power, is speaking to her, and she can see scripture written in the sky and in the bark of a tree. And the second is delusion of persecution. My father suffered from delusion of persecution when he was dealing with his psychotic break that eventually led to his suicide. He was convinced that we were stealing from him. He was convinced that, things that he could trust about the world were actually all falling apart, and that he was basically being made to leave his home and having everything taken from him. In hers, Tiffany Lucas's experience, according to this forensic psychiatrist, she was convinced that she and her sons were the target of a conspiracy of these unknown and powerful people. She believed that she was being stalked and that her sons were going to get abducted. So this forensic psychiatrist is basically claiming that her beliefs were that she was certain that they were headed for a fate worse than death. He also said that Tiffany loved her children. She didn't choose to be psychotic. Of course, nobody chooses to be psychotic. And even though she did the most horrendous thing, do I think that she didn't love her kids? No, I think she did love her kids. But that still isn't a reasonable excuse for action. Now, her attorneys said that she had been crying out for help, apparently, but she couldn't articulate what was going on. She didn't understand that she was in the throes of a mental health crisis. That is true. As I've said, I've worked in this field, I've lived this field, and one of the most frustrating things is that the person that you know is having a psychotic break from reality doesn't get that they're having that. And it's really, really hard because you're watching them with these delusional belief systems and you can't argue with them because that actually alienates you further, and you can't support them because you collude with that scenario. So you just have to be reassuring, and it's really hard work. So I do fully understand that this forensic psychiatrist is saying, look, this is where she was in that mindset. She didn't know she was having a mental breakdown. She didn't know she was out of her mind. And the ways that she acted, she had these core beliefs that seemed to support them. Like I said, none of that excuses the final outcome. Now, the court was played footage from a doorbell camera on the morning of November the 7th, 2003, which is the day before the murders. Lucas had actually gone to a neighbour's house and told the neighbour that she basically needed her. She said, I need an anchor, I need a good friend, I need a good person in my life. God is talking to me and I just need to be a mother. I need to be a mother. I need to have good people around me. I need family. I need help. And it's an issue. I need you. I need you to come help me clean my house and get my kids right. So understandably, that's a massive cry for help. And the neighbour was probably quite perplexed by it. But it does play into this idea that there were things going on with her quite seriously on a mental health level. Now, the same day, it was noted that she took the boys to a Waffle House. So that's a good thing to do. That's what you want to do with your kids. You want to get them out. You want to make sure they're eating. There's obviously a maternal instinct and intent there. But when she was at that Waffle House, she caused quite a lot of concern. So a member of staff who served her said that when he asked her questions, she just sat there. She wouldn't respond. He actually used the quote, she looked like a deer in the headlights. She wasn't comprehending anything. It's like nothing was going in. She wasn't processing appropriately. And he was basically asking her questions and she just wasn't responding effectively. He also noted that while she was there with the children, the kids were cracking jokes, they were smiling. And in his opinion, he felt like the kids were well taken care of and clean. He said one of the things that disturbed him was that Tiffany Lucas was just looking behind herself all the time as if somebody was after her. He said like she was running from something maybe. And a second member of staff verified these concerns, said that Tiffany Lucas wasn't okay, she wasn't coherent, said that she didn't seem normal or seem to understand anything that was going on. They said that she was all shaky trying to count her money and she even started crying. So that in itself demonstrates somebody in mental decline. They also went on to say it was weird, like she was looking right through us. She was just not there. Like she was present, but she was not present. Now, bear in mind, on the mornings of the murders, she'd kept the boys off school because she wanted them to be together. Now, she'd also at this moment in time received an Amber Alert, and a woman at the Waffle House had Amber written on her name tag. Now, she takes this as a significant sign that the alert is meant for her and her children. So basically, she believes that this is a warning to her that people are coming to hurt her. So she believes essentially that her time's run out, that people are onto her, they're after her, they're on the way to her door, and essentially she now has no exit opportunity. That's the argument basically that the forensic is putting forward. And don't get me wrong, with respect, there are people clearly validating that there is unusual behaviour and typology about her actions as a mother, as given in statements by those two Waffle House workers. Now, the argument basically is that because she had all of this fear, because she was having this psychotic break, because she was in this mental decline, she decides that the only way for her children to be safe is to kill them. So she shoots the children in the head to kill them as painlessly as possible. That's the argument. She then said that she did turn the gun on herself, but the gun jammed. Now, with respect again, she did have wounds on her hands, and they are consistent apparently with trying to unjam the gun. So she does seem to be consistent in that story, and there is evidence to demonstrate that consistency. And when it came down to the sentencing, she's pled guilty. So she unsurprisingly is sentenced to 2 life sentences. She wasn't given any leniency. There was actually a round of applause in the courtroom when that sentence was handed down. The judge, who was Rodney Barres, said, and I completely relate to what they say actually, I think this is just so tantamount to how we all feel in these situations. The judge said, I cannot imagine the sheer horror these children must have experienced seeing their mother with a gun. The sheer horror. That second child as he heard the discharge of that weapon for the first child, and maybe even both of them, seeing their mother pull the trigger, taking their lives. Now, in spite of the fact that she's got 2 life sentences, she will be eligible for parole after 20 years, but the prosecuting attorney reportedly said it is very unlikely that she'll ever make parole. Now, Darrell Howard, who's Jaden's older half-brother, so they share the same father, not mother, said that multiple members of his family had reported Lucas to child services, which is deeply disturbing if no one's acted appropriately on that information. Now, I haven't got why they reported her because the information isn't out there. What he did say was, we wanted them. We would have taken them with open arms. We love them so much. I should have done more. Oh, that guilt's awful, isn't it? You know, I should have done more. You did. You spoke to child services. What could you have done? Ran in, kidnapped the kids. You'd have just been in trouble. This is a problem. This is the issue with these scenarios. Of course, you would have done more if you'd known what was going to happen. You would have actually gone and abducted them to protect them from being killed. But this is by the by. Hindsight is the most amazing gift, isn't it? The truth is, they tried and they were failed. It's as simple as that. He actually said, if it came to me, snatching the boys out of the house, I should have. And I will hold that on my back for the rest of my life for both them boys. What a shame. He did nothing wrong. He loved those children, both of them, not just one of them. He would have protected them and provided for them as a big brother. And it's been denied him because of these actions. He also said that he'd been spending more time with both Jaden and Peanut since the death of their father. And obviously that meant that the bridges that were being built were very powerful. And it's really heartwarming to see that this young man was spending time with both of the boys since he'd lost his dad. Because only one of those boys was biologically related to him and his father, but he was spending time with both of the children. That's a really compassionate heart, a really open heart, and a relationship that could have really stood the test of time and thrived, and it's been denied. Now, one of the things about Tiffany Lucas that's quite disconcerting when I see this backdrop of mental illness and that she's really losing her mind, because she was unbelievably active on social media for somebody who was in that situation. So on Jaden's 6th birthday, she actually posted, "My baby boy, firstborn, love child, Mr. Perfect himself. Jaden will be 6 tomorrow. No, I cannot wrap my head around it. Jaden is seriously the strongest, sweetest, most incredible little king I have ever met." I'm not saying that because he's my child. Everyone who's ever met Jaden, loved Jaden, and been around Jaden will tell you God took his time with Jaden. God knew what he was doing with this one. I'm so blessed every day I get to spend with Jaden. The countless hugs, cuddles, and conversations we share, I could never take for granted. I love and admire Jaden every day, not just on his birthday. I love my kings different, and that's why Jaden and Peanut are different types of children. They are God sent. And every wrong I have ever done or any hurt I've ever caused, I'm so focused on correcting and loving them longer and deeper. I strive every single day for them, their happiness, their future and well-being. I cannot guarantee a lot of things in life, but I can guarantee the mother I will always be, the love I will always share, and the best I can ever give and do will be promised to you, my love. Jaden and Peanut. My whole heart and my whole existence is Jaden and Peanut's forevermore. Also on Valentine's Day 2022, she wrote, "I love my babies every day of the year. I will always use any excuse to celebrate them and show them how special they are." And on her last Mother's Day with her babies, she posted on Facebook, "Every day is Mother's Day in my world. I can only thank God for blessing me with the utmost respectful, compassionate, strong, silly, emotional, overprotective, obsessive, loving young kids that call me mommy, mom, and mama. I don't think I would know how to smile, love, or survive if it wasn't for them. Even on our bad days, they shower me with an abundance of love, always together, never apart, 3 souls, 1 heart." So very, very celebratory of her relationship with her children, very actively loving and open on media in all forms, expressing those feelings towards her children, and heartbreaking when you think about the outcome of what I've been talking about today. Imagine being in a situation where when you look at a social media feed, it looks like there's this loving family. And I have to note as well, I've actually been on quite a lot of news outlets, comment sections, just to see what people were saying about Tiffany Lucas. Now, I will say that people who knew her said that as far as they were concerned, she was always seeming to be a good mother. Don't get me wrong, appearances can be very deceptive. Social media can give a really unrealistic, glossy insight into someone's lives. And you don't put the negatives on the whole, do you? You're not like, oh my God, look at my hair today. I look like I fell out of a car at 60 miles per hour, with evidence with your hair looking like that. That's not really what people do. A lot of people just, they really filter their lives. They socially construct this image as opposed to demonstrating what's really going on. It's why people are surprised when celebrities get divorced. You know, people are like, I would never have thought that Orlando and Katy Perry would split up because they were always smiling together. Yes, because they are media trained, and that's what you do when you're a celebrity. So people are quite shocked when you've only ever seen the front facing version and that's been permitted into the social media arena, and you suddenly come to terms with the fact that it's all BS. So the truth is, we could say maybe she was a doting mum until that fateful day, but then she wasn't, because she snapped and murdered her kids. Also, I do have to note the fact that the house was filthy. If it's filthy, you're not providing a safe arena for your children to grow up in. It's not sanitary, it's not compassionate, it's not safe. So there is some juxtapositions in this woman's behaviour that I think frustrates a lot of the general public. Because the truth is, it leaves questions like, did the children suffer unknowingly behind closed doors before that murder? You know, were they struggling because she wasn't providing them with an environment that was safe? Was she trying her best to just put on an act? She wanted to portray herself as a certain way online, but behind closed doors it was different. I will also note that I've watched videos of her children and they do seem happy. They don't seem afraid of her. She doesn't actively come across as abusive in the videos. Of course, I know that you're not going to put things out there, although some people do when they're being aggressive towards their kids. It's bizarre. But, you know, for the most part, predators don't do that. But people who knew the family said that there wasn't anything that really suggested the children were unhappy. So it's hard to actually process whether Jaden and Peanut had lived really good lives until their deaths, or if there'd been a decline and they were being treated differently by their mum in the lead up to being killed by her. What we do know is the Waffle House witnesses did actually validate that the kids seemed happy and were laughing and joking with each other. They didn't seem to be afraid of their mother in that moment. So it is really challenging in this case to kind of wrap your head around exactly what you're dealing with. She'd obviously had previous issues with drug use. The only thing that I think I'm certain on, absolutely certain on, is that two gorgeous little boys lost their lives so needlessly. And in those final moments that they shared with the mother, they must have been terrified. They must have been terrified that this person who's meant to love, protect, and nurture them was the person who was snuffing out their very existence. I can't even begin to imagine the hurt, the betrayal, the shock, the terror. It must have been indescribable. Now, I will tell you, in the general press, she has been absolutely vilified, as well as with respect by her family. And I think that it's completely understandable, because two children lost their lives. And when we think about who we're going to pit our emotions towards, most of us are going to pit our emotions towards those children. But I also think it would be remiss of me to say, and actually lazy of me to say, that she was simply evil. I think that she was somebody who did love her boys. I think that she was probably in the depths of psychosis, and maybe because of my personal experience, having lost my father to suicide through psychosis, I have a stronger link to understanding this along with my actual experience in work. It doesn't excuse action, ever. It really doesn't. At the end of the day, you make your choices. But I don't want it to come across that Tiffany Lucas was this horrendous mother who for many years had abused her children and then finally killed them. It doesn't work that way in this case. It does feel like there was a significant level of mental decline. Now, I know that it's far easier for me to hate parents who kill their children, and I can do that quite easily in cases. I really can. I can view them as evil. I judge them harshly. There's a elevator, and putting them down personally in it. If there's a human microwave, I'm asking whether I can turn it up to 10 minutes and press the start button. I don't have any problem with that, guys. You know I don't. But in this case, I do want to make it clear that I think there's a lot more going on than an evil mother who wanted out of her responsibilities. There is no doubt, as far as I'm concerned, that Lucas was suffering from some form of mental health issue when she murdered her boys. And let's be honest, that seemed evident to people who'd never met her before in the Waffle House. She was a mother who potentially was just imploding with all these belief systems that were delusional and pressures that she believed were there that weren't real and that weren't treated. But what I suppose we boil it down to is this: the legal outcome is clear, 2 life sentences. But the deeper cost, aside from the fact that she will probably be incarcerated for the rest of her natural life, is the loss of opportunities that could have come forward in the form of help, the agony of the grieving family who have to live with this forever. They've got a life sentence that's equal to hers. And it's also that reminder, I guess, to each and every one of us that mental health decline can happen really quickly. It can happen over time. And very often the person who is going through, particularly when we're talking about psychotic breaks, those experiences, they don't recognize it. It's real for them. It's real. So when they are telling you they're paranoid and suspicious, when they are accusing you of things, they absolutely believe it's real. It's not made up. And if you see any of that spiraling, it's so imperative to get help for that individual. And it's hard, and it's getting harder because resources are thin and mental health is frustrating to deal with, particularly if you're a loving family member. And a lot of individuals who are in this situation absolutely end up isolated and abandoned, which is awful. Don't get me wrong, I can see both sides of it, but it's really, really scary for that person. In fact, it kind of validates all of their fears. And sometimes that person can seem okay. They can kind of mask it for a period of time. But beneath the surface, it's bubbling, it's festering, and it's growing. And it's so paramount that we call this out and try our best to be supportive in these situations, because tragic consequences can rarely, but can follow. I lived it. It was me who cut my father down. It was me who arrived at his suicide. So believe me, it happens. Unfortunately, my dad didn't kill anybody else. It was himself. He murdered himself. But this happens rarely, like I said. But nonetheless, we should prepare for rare occasions, because we should always, in these situations, account for the worst case scenario, not the best. The thing about this case that really speaks to me is there is a map of missed signals. There is an urgent call for more need for mental health support. There is a recognised lack of intervention that plays out so often in these cases. And unfortunately, that means that sometimes we find out about what is going so horribly wrong when it is far too late. These boys deserved so much more, and they ended up with nothing. Not even the breath in their bodies. Like I said, I am not defending Tiffany Lucas. She's fully accountable and fully responsible for killing her children. She made a choice. But I also feel that it is disrespectful to not acknowledge how mental health can play into these situations where psychosis is absolutely spiraling a person's mental well-being and taking them to a paradigm and a universe that none of us can encounter unless we've been there. People act in the most heinous of ways to themselves, very occasionally to others. And in this case, I don't think it's the plain sailing. This is a malevolent woman who's selfish and deserves to be locked away for the rest of her life as considered an evil human being. I think that she definitely is somebody who needs to serve her sentence, whether that's forever in prison or otherwise. But she also is somebody that certainly lacked the provision of support that could have made a difference. And that's not having a go at the family. The family are amazing. They made it clear to her that they were always supportive. The children could have been dropped off there. And they have to carry that burden that she didn't make that choice instead. Because she could have taken her own life, and that would have been awful. It would have been a tragedy. But it would have been a very different outcome for those boys. And those boys absolutely deserved that other outcome. As I always say, guys, please feel free to disagree with me. I appreciate that for some of you it's very clear she's evil. I also acknowledge that some of you will think that the sentence that she's been given is probably too long because she was having a mental health crisis. I imagine some of you are like me, very much on the fence. Let me know your thoughts, and I'll see you again next time. Look after yourself, guys. Take care. Be safe.